Hi everyone, and welcome to my YouTube channel. It was JP Morgan who said that gold is money and everything else is credit. The debate these days about whether a fiat currency is gold backed or not is actually quite a joke, to be fairly honest. There is absolutely no fiat currency out there that is truly gold backed. Even if we look, for example, at the ruble in Russia, which is one of the currencies in which the central bank owns a higher level of gold reserves relative to money supply, even so, its significant levels of gold reserves don't avoid the reality that it is also a very volatile and very risky currency in many cases, because it is probably more dependent on oil prices, commodity prices, more subject to the fluctuations in commodity prices than the gold reserves that it owns. If we look at the currencies globally, the yuan, for example, many people talk about the gold-backed yuan. The yuan is one of the least actually gold-backed currencies out there. It has been increasing money supply. The Chinese central bank and China has been increasing money supply significantly above its gold reserves. And if we put together all of its gold reserves, they account for less than 0.3% of money supply. Having gold reserves is an important thing for central banks in order to keep a certain stability in their assets and in order to diversify the asset base. That's why they have been buying gold when at the same time they were increasing money supply, and that's why they will likely continue to do so. But the reality is that no fiat currency today is gold backed at all. Even if gold prices went through the roof, it doesn't even start to address the issue of the massive liquidity injections and huge increases in money supply from central banks globally. It does not even start to address the issue of how little level of backing with true reserves currencies have, because many of the reserves that central banks have are actually ownership of debt from other countries. As for example, in the case of China, its large foreign exchange reserves are fundamentally US dollar denominated bonds, US Treasury bonds. One of the things that we need to think of, therefore, is that if we want to start to believe in the concept of a gold-backed currency, two things have to happen. First is that the central bank increases massively the holdings of gold that they currently have. They would need to multiply them numerous times. Second is that central banks will start to implement sound monetary policies that reduce the increase of money supply relative to GDP growth and relative to their overall reserves, because it's a two-way street. You cannot just increase your reserves when the increase of money supply massively outpaces the improvement in gold reserves. So if any government out there wants to sort of say that they have a gold-backed currency, they have to do both things. They have to increase their reserves and at the same time reduce the aggressiveness in the growth of money supply. Not just reduce the aggressiveness, but actually start thinking about not increasing money supply higher than real GDP. Something that today no government and no central bank in the world is willing to do. It is true that the United States, and we have a video explaining here, benefits from the global shortage of US dollars. And I recommend to watch that video in which I explain why there's a US dollar shortage globally and what that means for emerging markets, etc. But that is not the case for the euro, for the yuan, for the yen, for the ruble, for so many other currencies. We need to really start thinking, and governments really need to start paying attention to the importance of sound monetary policy. What we are living right now is simply insane. And when central banks are telling us that there is no problem because inflation is not rising, because there's no inflation, and when obviously there is inflation, but when they tell us that, it is exactly as if we were driving at 100 miles an hour down a road, looking at the rearview mirror and saying accelerate because we haven't crashed yet. Means that central banks really have to start paying attention to the collateral damages of their policies, and they need to start at least getting closer to sound monetary policies. Central Bank of Russia has tried to do these things. The Chinese central bank at least has tried to brag about it, but numbers don't show it. The Federal Reserve at least understands that there is a global shortage of US dollars. But regardless of little differences here and there, the reality is that fiat currencies are not gold-backed at all, and that as such, we may not believe in a return to a gold standard, and it might not even be necessary. What we need is for governments and central banks to stop increasing the massive monetary imbalances of the world that lead us to constant new crises of which we get out with weaker recoveries. So, there is absolutely no gold-backed currency out there. It is, if anything, it is the US dollar that is the most backed by demand and gold reserves. But it's not even important, it's not even a debate. The reality is that central banks globally, if what they want to do is to maintain a system that does not lead to constant crisis and weak recoveries, is to address the imbalances not by increasing massively money supply and increasing the level of destruction of purchasing power of currencies, but following sound money policies. That's what we have to go to at some point. Thank you very much. Thanks for following this YouTube channel. Please subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, watch the other videos, and keep defending freedom. Thank you very much.